everyone. Welcome to our panel. It's going to be titled Advancing AI Model Training and the Usage of Web3 Data. I'm Jairo Boyd, I'm the moderator. I'm from PlayFi. And PlayFi, we actually do a lot with AI pipelines and translating real-world data into sort of AI-focused Web3 content, right? So putting blockchain stuff using AI. And so I think our panelists here all have a lot to say about this. So I'm personally very excited to learn from them. So hopefully we all learn a bunch of cool stuff today. I'm just going to kind of go down the row here. Hello, go down the row here. And if everyone could just introduce yourselves and tell me a bit about what you're working on right now.
Hi, I'm Al from Koi. Koi is a network of about now 86,000 home computers. And you can use them for everything from web crawling to running Docker containers and instances. So it's a really good home for AI. The big benefit of Koi is that you can issue tokens directly to the node operators, so you don't actually have to pay up front. They can mine your token, and you get everything for free.
Hey, my name is Wei. I'm the founder of ADOT. So I was a Google engineer before, so I've been doing a lot of things related to search engine. So right now, what ADOT is doing is that we are building a Web3 search engine that you can use any Web3 data like what you use Google. And also, our search engine will be run fully on-chain finally. Yeah, so that will be something the community can drive, the community can control, and the community can get rewarded from.
My name is Greg Osuri. Check. My name is Greg. I'm the founder for Akash Network, CEO for Overclock Labs. Akash is the world's first open source and decentralized supercloud with a focus on accelerated computing, serving majority of the decentralized AI workloads. Our users tend to be a good mix of both decentralized AI as well as traditional AI companies like Brev.dev or Venice.ai, which is it's co-founded by Eric Voorhees with a focus on censorship resistance and privacy running on Akash Network. Akash is also only place to get on-demand H100s and A100s at a price point that's fairly advantageous than your typical options available.
Hey everybody, Peter Espino. I'm the business development lead for Mine Network. And what we're building is our FHE restaking layer for Web3. We started out more on the AI side, providing the FHE for the validators and for their projects. We work closely with BitTensor on that. And now we're starting to expand more onto the Web3 side on how we can utilize our FHE technology with LRT projects, and then also building more with Zama on the LLMs.
Cool, thanks for those intros. Really excited to hear from all of you guys today. So we'll keep this kind of conversational. I'll open up with some questions kind of for everybody. If anybody has anything to jump in on, feel free to pass the mics around and we can just chat. But I want to start out with some existing content, right? What are we seeing now? So can you share some examples of successful AI models that have been already trained using Web3 data? And what advantages did training on that decentralized data have, or changes or detriments have on those outcomes?
I can go. So Akash, we have several foundational models trained on Akash. The first one was Thumper. So Thumper was a model trained, it was SDXL model, so a stable diffusion model, retrained to use data that doesn't have copyright infringement, problems, right? Because most data that you do with Gen AI has some degree of copyright problems. In Thumper, the team couldn't really get access to H100s, or in fact, they used 24,000 A100 hours, and they couldn't get A100s anywhere in the world. So you can't. Now it's gotten a little bit easier, but we're talking about a few months ago. It's impossible to get A100s on demand. So small teams are unable to, are pretty much priced out and accessed out. Because today, if you want to get A100s or H100s, you got to have long contracts with these cloud providers, right? So there's one big way Web3 is actually helping a lot of these small teams. Second model we have trained on Akash in recent was the first ever model to be first ever Latin language model to be pre-trained on Akash, right? Same thing, access problem. A common trend tends to be access to H100s, right? And now. And also the right type of access. For example, Akash has very, very granular scheduling in the sense like if you want H100s with SXM5 configuration, or if you want PCIe, or wide variety of options are very not available in most places. So Akash gives you that single viewpoint where you can have very granular access, because Akash can go places where your typical cloud cannot, right? So by going into places where there are GPUs, either owned by machine learning companies or crypto companies that bought them a while back, Akash is able to aggregate the compute and provide a very interesting, very useful price point. Another big use case we see, another big model thing that's being trained now is by News Research. News is a very popular, AI company, like AI teams. I think they developed this model called Hermes, and they're using Akash now to train the next model, right? So there are lots of use cases now where you actually have real training, and also you can talk about Flock, which is doing federated learning. So federated learning is essentially where you have lots of we have cases where you want high privacy for your data, so healthcare data, that you don't necessarily want to expose to a large LLM, but you still want to reap the benefits of LLM without exposing your data, right? That's called federated learning. That's being right now done on Akash. Flock is doing it. So there's lots of interesting use cases because now in a federated learning scenario, you want to keep your data, you want to maintain your privacy at the same time, and the only way to do that is to bring compute to you instead of you go into the compute. And decentralized systems are exceptional ways to do that, right? So you have very interesting different types of models that are being trained now in decentralized systems.
Yeah, I want to double tap on the idea of federated learning and how this applies to data privacy, which is kind of the original question. The really interesting thing about federated learning is it can run locally on a device that has permissioned access to something. So this could be personal health data that you wouldn't otherwise be able to expose, or it could be some access that you have to a website or other like content source. This is really important because right now, if you look at Chat GPT, a lot of the leading AI models out there have been trained on public data, but what they can't get is something that's out there that's private. And if you actually bring the power of the crowd through Web3 and like kind of these coordination mechanisms that we have, that's actually how you can get this better fit to some like kind of data set that's actually not available to these larger players. And also, Wei has some amazing stuff on this.
Yeah, we are going node. Hello. I would talk about the large language model plus search engine. Actually, that's one of the trends in Web2 AI as well today. Because the problem for AI is that it's not transparent, it's not real time, and also it could be biased. So yeah, actually the AI industry have found out that maybe if you combine search engine with AI, that's a better solution because AI is real time. Search engine is real time, right? It's reliable. It gives you reliable sources. So that's what we are doing at ADOT. But what we are doing actually, we are covering not just the on-chain Web3 data, we are covering everything about Web3. That could be on-chain, like on Ethereum, Solana. That could be also off-chain, like on Aave. It could be on Twitter or Discord. That's something all the Web3 users care about, right? We have crawled all the data, and then we have a Web3 search engine for that. And when users ask any question, AI will call the search engine to search for the relevant data, and then give AI to give the answer. So that's a very good solution because then AI become real time. It can become the reliable because it tells you the sources, how you get the conclusion, right? And also, that's how we do that today. So I think that's a very interesting trend and a very interesting direction for us. Yeah.
What was the question again?
So yeah, just what kind of successful AI models have already been trained using Web3 data, or what sort of advantages do you see Web3 data training applying to these AI models that maybe don't apply to traditionally trained AI models in the Web2 space?
Yeah, so I'll make a clarification. So my network doesn't specifically intertwine with the AI models, but what we do is we provide the security and the encryption for the data with those models, right? So the biggest things is the ethics of how it's computed right now, and our layer, what it does is it encrypts the data, and it creates a shared private state for like the validators to utilize. Encrypting the sensitive data is very key, and then also like preventing the users from being seen, but also having the access for the validators to compute and analyze and verify the models without having access to the sensitive data. So that's more of an important aspect that we're utilizing with AI models. and also with these projects that have those.
Yeah, I think it's really cool to see the kind of congruency among just like privacy and like the access and the concern about how the data is shared among everything that we spoke about. I think that's definitely something that Web3 is very concerned about as a whole, which is just like personal privacy, the identity and ownership of your own stuff, but also powering it as a group network. So I love hearing how all you guys are thinking about that. So Greg, I want to go back to you with the Akash network. So can you cover a bit, how does Akash network facilitate processing and storage of those AI training models that you kind of spoke about a bit earlier? And what advantages are you using for those decentralized clouds infrastructure when you bring to that process? Like, what are we doing specifically with your network there?
So, I mean, processing in the sense like training, or we?
Yeah, it's
What do you
anything
mean?
with like processing or even just accessing it once it's trained. Just basically, what are you using that's more decentralized than perhaps just running it on maybe a regular network the way a Chat GPT would?
Right. So Akash foundationally uses a blockchain, right? It's a layer one blockchain, and it built using Cosmos SDK, and it's foundationally permissionless. So in order to provide compute or use compute, there is no need to ask anyone's permission, and no one can stop you from using Akash, right? So, and it's open source. It's the only open source cloud that's actually functioning, right? So, what that means is anyone that builds on Akash can have the confidence that the power is going to, they can have access to the power no matter how big they get, right? So, uh, the blockchain is used for coordination and settlement, but the actual execution happens off chain. So from the decentralization standpoint, because the access to the compute is not gated, that makes it decentralized. And because there's no centralized point of failure, it makes it decentralized. Akash has been running for about 4 years now, nonstop. Not a single time it went down, right? So those are some of the key decentralization, primitives that you leverage when you use Akash, right? So from a processing standpoint, well, it is you get the GPUs that you can get on your traditional cloud. And when you do get lucky, sometimes Amazon will be like, hey, look, there's some on-demand H100s available. It'll be available for a few hours, and the pricing is like $8 per hour for H100, whereas Akash you pay $1.50 for H100. So there's significant savings, right? And that means a lot for a lot of companies, especially students and whatnot. So yeah, so you have this cost advantage and access advantage that you don't normally get. Like and Brev.dev, which is a very popular fine tuning as a service, is like they consider to be the Firebase of AI. For them, it's they're building a whole business on top of Akash, right? And the reason why they did that was they have this guarantee that when you make those investments, that no one's going to pull the plug. Like Amazon, if you build stuff on Amazon, if you are successful, Amazon will try to either acquire you or shut you down because they have the API key. And it's a typical pattern we see with Web2 companies, right? If you build on someone's platform, you get too big, they will shut you down because it's a business unit for them, right? And Akash, you don't have that problem. So you have that amazing confidence that you don't normally get with your traditional infrastructure that you get with Akash. And so that goes a long way, right, in terms of trust. So that's what decentralization means for Akash. And another aspect of the decentralization is sustainability aspect, right? So Akash has about 500 contributors funded by a on-chain fund, right? And that is because of a tokenized economy, which is not possible in your traditional Web2 systems. And we have now researchers from University of Texas and MIT and a whole lot of like top tier schools, PhDs to professors that are actually like making proposals and winning those proposals and then working for Akash. These people are not normally employable, right? I mean, they want their research to be publishable and they want to be open source and all that. And that's only possible in a decentralized system. So we're able to attract talent. We're able to sustain that talent. We're able to create a mechanism where the community really drives the development evolution of the network, not a company. So Akash makes compute a public good, essentially.
Yeah, I think it is interesting when you're dealing with these Web2 organizations that kind of get you on both ends. When you're too small, you can't afford to use their services and their costs and their machine learning and stuff. But then when you get too big, they're like, no, don't use all of our services all the time. You kind of get hit on both ends. So it's nice to hear that Akash kind of helps solve that with not getting you on either end, but instead facilitating you the whole way through. Al, I want to shift over to you. So I know that Coley aims to decentralize engagement and attention data, those sort of metrics and information. So, how can this decentralized approach improve the quality and the diversity of the data that's used for training AI models, or I guess any other applications you think would be relevant there?
Yeah, so tracking attention on the internet is actually a gigantic problem. It's the primary responsibility of companies like Google and Facebook, and that's how they make their money. The scary thing, though, is if you had a decentralized open tracking pixel that had all this information, then effectively all of that would be out there just like Bitcoin blockchain data is. And that's terrifying, right? So what we started doing at Koi about 3 years ago is building out a network of computers that can actually host all of this content. And then that same network of computers can also be used for computing over that data and providing storage. And actually, at this point, we have over a petabyte of data now stored on an IPFS cloud that's hosted by these nodes, which is spectacular. Because you think about it, there's 86,000 home computers. And if you imagine 86,000 people with computers, that's like a football stadium of people sitting there with a computer running that you can tap into if you create an offering on Koi. And you can do this very easily. So even like a junior developer can come to our easy sandbox, and within like about half an hour, they can deploy a task. And these tasks can run then on all these devices. And then the thing that we're really excited about most recently is the ability to then have also Docker containers that run on this cloud. So you can take anything that's running on the traditional cloud and port it over onto Koi. And you don't pay necessarily with the Koi token. You pay gas fees in the Koi token. But you can pay in any token you want. And so you can even create your own token and then distribute this to people. And so for a new developer coming out, we say you should be able to crowd build, work with the community, find the right things, crowdsource the hardware that you need. And then once you've crowdsourced enough hardware and you've got something that's out there working, you've actually created a very valuable product. And so at that point, then we say, hey, come and actually crowdfund this with the community and let them buy into this idea. And so our goal is to take people from 0 to 100 without ever having to make a deal with a hosting provider. You just need a community.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, community empowerment, of course, another one of those Web3 ethos where you allow individuals and decentralized organizations to buy in, and both logistically and financially and computationally, I think are very important. So it's great to hear that.
Yeah, ultimately, tokenization and like this whole Web3 thing is really about coordinating groups of people. And that's what Bitcoin was at the beginning. People didn't mine Bitcoin at the beginning because they wanted to make money. They mined Bitcoin because they wanted to support Bitcoin.
Yep.
And that's where we're trying to get back to with this, is the original cypherpunk ethos of the space.
That's really cool. Yeah, I think there's a bit of a yearning for that return to the core ethos of like, I'm doing this because I care about this, and I think it's interesting, not just because I think it'll go up 100x, which, I mean, that's not bad, but it can't be the only thing we're looking at.
Yeah, a little less Wall Street, a little more All Street.
And so, Dr. Wei, I'd like to move over to you. So with ADOT, what innovation methods is ADOT implementing to ensure privacy and security? You kind of mentioned those things earlier on, of the Web3 data that's used in those training models. You kind of touched on this initially, but how do those methods differ from some of the traditional data privacy approaches?
Sure. First of all, I want to mention how valuable those data are, because I would take my experience at Google as an example. When I work at Google, I had the largest database for users in the world. I have 6 billion devices, and whatever they do on the device or where you go, I know all this. It's very powerful. So that's why we care a lot about user privacy at ADOT. First of all, like what I said, like we don't feed all the data, the content data, off-chain or on-chain data into large language model, because if they all go to large language model, you cannot control what it does with this data, right? So that's why we put a lot of data on search engine. So when you put on search engine, you can control the access of that. For example, if we crawl the public data, then everybody can, when AI answers a question for anybody, it will search for the data and give the result to users. But if the data is not so public, for example, if it's Telegram or Discord data, that's only a public to some users, right? We will only return results to those specific users. And to the extent, to the extreme, if we have some data that's only available to yourself, then it could be your private search engine, right? That's very easy to do in search engine. This is the first thing. The second thing is about the user data. Because when users search for a lot of things, we know their behaviors, like what Google does. So we use some mechanism to cut different granularity. Like, let me take this for example. It's like a satellite. If some users, user with who doesn't have a lot of access to this data, they can only look at the Earth from very high level, like 10 kilometers away from the Earth. then they can know something. For example, okay, users are interested in AI today, users are interested in DP tomorrow, then they can know this general information. But if that's users or developers who have access to this data, they can look at your house just 10 meters away, ahead of you, right? They can know, okay, what this house is. So that's how we use this kind of different level granularity to control who can access what user data. We can make this data useful to a lot of people, but also we can control the access, the privacy for this data. Yeah.
Yeah, that seems really powerful, being able to essentially give me access to all my data all the time and giving you access to my public data or data that I permission without necessarily compromising my, as you mentioned, like healthcare records, for example. So that seems really powerful, absolutely. Cool. Yeah, thanks for that. So, Peter, I want to talk about Mind Network. So, what ways does Mind Network, you have this FHE restaking layer. How does that contribute to both the reliability and the performance of Connext and these other adopted solutions? So, and what are they doing now, and what do you foresee them doing in the future as they continue to improve and grow?
Yeah. So the restaking layer is like a new vertical that we've started to approach. But how we worked with Connext is more on our FHE technology and our FHE encryption layer. So here at Mind, our FHE tech creates a a shared private state for the messaging layer on bridges like Connext or Everclear, what they're called now. And what that does is before the transaction comes to the validator, it goes through our FHE layer, which encrypts the sensitive data. So, but it also still allows the validators to verify and also execute their smart contracts, but still keep that sensitive data protected, right? In a permissionless environment, especially for bridges, you have validators specifically for that bridge. Anyone can become a validator, right? So now you have potential for bad actors, and bridging is you're very vulnerable, right? So these validators sometimes, even the bad actors, they have access to that info, how much, from who, and they can potentially do malicious activity like front running or a MEV attack. So that's why we do have those, how do you say, penalty activities like slashing and time bombing. But what our layer does now is it prevents that. It can prevent those malicious activities because they're now not able to fully see like the sensitive data, like what I listed before, but still able to execute their smart contracts and also verify when the transaction is submitted against across the bridge. So the biggest aspect is security, and I like how everyone else is talking about like security, especially with their data, because in Web3, right, it's permissionless and it's all about protecting our data. But then also we still need to have that fine balance on successfully processing, verifying, and executing the smart contracts. The biggest things I foresee, of course, is more cross-chain compatibility, more scaling, and more adoption. Right, Connection Everclear, it's amazing. You still have to pay a fee, but you have that access to that special type of bridge, and then especially with our FHE layer across it, you have that added security of the prevention of being front-run or MEVed when you utilize their bridge.
Yeah, I think protecting the data on the back end and the training, those are very important, but also the access points, like and the ways people are directly interacting, smart contracts and bridges. People are very vulnerable at those points, as you mentioned. I think we're all aware here that bridges are just the most hacked place possibly in all of the smart contracts, and it's because they're hard and there's a lot of vulnerability and a lot of data being chugged through them that people are kind of trying to always take advantage of. Is that something you're seeing now, like with the current systems you have? Like, are you seeing this giving better protections to the avoid front runnings and MEV attacks and those sort of situations, or is this something like we're building towards? Where are we out there?
Both. Building towards. There's definitely a use case, and also it's more in a protection part, right? Because you don't want to be exposed of who you are. What if you're a big whale or an entity? And one fact to correlate to that is we utilize our tech also with Chainlink CCIP, more on the enterprise level. And what that does is, any big company with a lot of funds, say a bank and whatnot, they're going to use, they utilize Chainlink CCIP just because it's more, well known. It goes through security checks, but it's also a no-no that you can see that or connect the dots that it is to that bank. So our tech is already integrated in there, and they use that product, so they can have that added security layer.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think as more and more big players and more like individuals that want to keep their transactions private enter the space, I think it's going to be increasingly important. I mean, banks, they just don't want to share with everybody, and this gives them a way to use that technology without broadcasting everything on the Bitcoin blockchain, as you kind of mentioned earlier. So open this up to everyone. Anyone wants to jump in, has some thoughts. So what are some of the biggest challenges that you've experienced or maybe you've seen colleagues or other companies experience when integrating Web3 data into either AI training models or any of these like access points, right? So what are some of the struggles? How have you addressed those? What have the challenges been?
The struggle is real. So big challenge for us is attracting non Web3 folks into to using Akash. Like there's just a general lack of user engagement infrastructure in Web3. So converting a user from by a Google ad is impossible. And the two primary reasons when it comes to Akash, I'm pretty sure it's pretty much across the board. One is installing a wallet we take for granted, but wallet installation is a big ask. Usually in traditional products, it comes way later in the customer lifecycle. But if the expectation of installing a wallet to use a product, that breaks the user flow, that drops. I mean, our conversion rate in that step is enormously low, right? And second big challenge is just getting access to the tokens, right? Doesn't matter how many exchange listings you have. You may have the best listings, Akash is listed in Coinbase and whatnot, and most of our users tend to be in the US. It's still extremely high friction point to go to Coinbase, finish your KYC, and get your tokens. Even with the on-ramp solutions, you have a bunch of others. They're very insufficient, right? So there's still KYC requirements, and expecting a user to do KYC just to deploy a model which has nothing to do with finance is just enormous ask, right? So you have, and even with tokens, the nomenclatures, what do you call it, the vocabulary that we use, gas fees and all this stuff is just so foreign to a lot of people. So we don't take, and on top of that, you can't use a business credit card to purchase crypto. So most people pay their cloud bills using business cards. So we have these enormous challenges that prevent activation for a traditional user. If you take the pure Web3 route, there are shortcuts people take of putting like a username password, but then you lose the benefits of Web3, right? So we want to build something that's native Web3 and give an experience that's superior. And I think we cracked a solution. We're calling it trial wallets. Using this mechanism, you'll be able to still experience a non-custodial deployment without incurring the cost of getting a wallet installed or getting some AKT in your wallet to spend, right? So, I mean, happy to get into details, but I think using this, we can actually demonstrate that hey, Web3 is incredible once we can get to the aha moment, right? Like a lot of people just don't believe us that we have the GPUs because they don't see them yet, right? You got to use the product to see the GPUs, and if you can't use the product, you don't see them, right? So getting people to the aha moment with the least amount of clicks and least amount of friction is what these trial wallets are going to do. We'll be sharing details. I mean, I share details with in other Twitter accounts and whatnot, but it'll be live in a few months, and I'm super excited about this feature.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'll have to look into that. I mean, I'm eager to hear anybody else's difficulties, but I want to respond really quick that, like, yeah, onboarding, it's awful. I mean, and it's not, no matter the best intentions, like you said, you're either sacrificing on one way or another, or at some point you're like, please make a wallet or write down 16 words that mean something to you, but they don't if you're a user. So yeah, onboarding is going to be increasingly important.
Yeah, most of them just want to run it to Python script and just run NVIDIA SMI to check their GPUs are there or not.
They don't want to over-engineer. It's already a difficult thing they're doing. They don't want to, like you said, do KYC before they can access GPUs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Before they even trust this weird crypto network, right? Because most of them, let's be honest, our truth is not our best feature.
It's already a big leap to use a technology like that. So yeah. Any other difficulties? I'd love to hear.
Yeah, so one thing we've noticed is like budget-wise, if you have a lot of consumer hardware, it does make things quite a bit cheaper. But that's also countered by the fact that if you have a lot of consumer hardware, you can't necessarily trust the runtime. So you have to verify it by running it again. So your consumer hardware has to be a significant amount cheaper, and that means that your actual end user who's running the node is getting paid less than they would if they were hosting it on some kind of a data center. And so that trust capacity thing becomes problematic. One thing we were able to do to fix that is to use reputation pretty effectively. So we've actually started this process of credentialing all the nodes and then actually giving them reputation as they participate at a higher degree. And that seems to work fairly well in terms of reducing the replication factor. But there's still some aspect of like you have to come up with audits for the compute workloads that you do. So there's a lot of templatization that really comes in there. And kind of what we're seeing is that people are a lot more keen to do this when there's already an existing template for how to decentralize something. So we've gone very deep on web crawlers and scrapers. We've done very deep on databasing and types of applications like that, where you can verify the workloads. And so for those types of use cases, we're finding people are a lot more keen to actually use it. But it's definitely going to be a one product at a time kind of onboarding strategy. I think this will probably be something like with WordPress, where like most of the time when people use WordPress, they're not actually deploying a server themselves. And those types of things, I think, will make a big difference in the future.
At ADOT, I would talk about the technical challenge actually, because the major problem we need to solve is how to connect the human need with the machine data. 'Cause what I mean by machine data is that Web3 has a lot of numbers, have a lot of table, right? That's different from the human internet. Like what you use at Google, that's the human written articles. That's what I call human internet. So when user asks a question, for example, what assets Vitalik has, that's a human needs written by human language. But if you look at the data, that's kind of some wallet, Vitalik's wallet with some tokens, right? So these two cannot be matched. No matter you use AI or you use search engine, right? That's a real technical challenge. So, for example, if what Google does is pretty straightforward. Like if user asks, okay, what tokens Vitalik has, then Google look for those articles, whatever articles contain the word like Vitalik wallet tokens, those stuff, then Google will match that, right? But you cannot match that with machine data, with Web3 data, right? We need to do a lot of technical to know, okay, this wallet has a tag like Vitalik.eth, something like that, and this wallet has those token history. Then how to then return that to AI? AI will write an article saying, okay, here is tokens that the Vitalik has. Although that's very challenging, but we think that's a future, because my vision is that the machine internet will finally replace the human internet. The reason is that human does not need to browse all the internet. Human does not need to read 1 million web pages to get the knowledge they need today. They can just ask AI. So, but AI needs some real data, like the first-hand data, to give the precise information to it for it to understand, and then it knows how to tell user the conclusion. So that's what Web3 is good at. Web3 has a lot of those data. That's for machine. If the machine is AI, then machine can connect those data with user needs. So that's really a very challenge, but really some problem that was solving. So that's also the reason why my company is called ADOT, because we want to be the ... that connect user needs with all the Web3 data. And also we have very cool website, ADOT.SYZ. I think that's the coolest website. Yeah.
Yeah, something I never really considered is that you need that translation layer on both ends, right? You need to convert that human request into something that you can connect with that blockchain or that rich data, and then you need to then convert it back to show the user essentially like, hey, this is your result in a way that they can read, and not just like you said, a wallet or a list of chained addresses or whatever. So yeah, you need a translator kind of on both ends. So that's really interesting, and I hadn't considered that. So good to think about.
Yeah, our biggest struggle, and here's how it meshes up with AI and what we're doing to encounter it. Our big struggle is speed. Of course, it's always speed of transactions. Now, because of that, right, this is why we dove into the AI sector, because the processing time it takes for these validators to process and verify the large language models that they're working with takes about 15 minutes. With FHE's speed right now, ours is around 10 minutes. So we're able to work with these AI projects successfully. And now moving into blockchain, of course, blockchain speed is crazy, right? So how we're trying to fix that, we're working currently with Zama and providing that layer with their LLM library. And probably we're trying to work out something either more like a hybrid model, just because the hardware to perform these FHE technology is not up to date yet or up to speed. Once we could do that, then we pretty much have the holy grail of FHE. And this was actually mentioned by Vitalik last year that Web3 needs FHE. And this is what we're building at. So right now it's speed and also the hardware. So that's why we capitalize on the AI market. We're able to provide that service for them. Once we could find that solution to compete with the speeds on blockchain, then we're golden. Then we're good to go. But that's our biggest setback right now for fully utilizing the FHE layer into the blockchain network.
In a weird way, speed is almost not the worst problem to have because it inevitably gets better over time a little bit. So, as technology improves, both hardware-wise as well as, computationally, as we write better circuits and better processes, it just gets better. So, speed for sure improves, which is, if that's the biggest issue, is always good because it's like there's a horizon where it gets better. Yeah, so I want to talk a bit. This was when all of you did your intros and my initial question. All of you touched on some ethical considerations, both from your perspectives as well as maybe that the general public's considering. So, what are some of the key ethical concerns that need to be addressed when using Web3 data for AI model training? Web2 data. I think Dr. Wei, you mentioned it. Like, of course, there's it's trained on publicly available data, and there's even concerns about that. Certainly, we've all seen in the news, with image generation, all these concerns, right? So Web3 is not immune from that. So what are some of the concerns there? And then what do you think the industry should be considering? What are some best practices, in your opinion, they should be looking forward to addressing some of these ethical concerns to make users and content creators all feel comfortable with this tech?
Well, with AI, we humans are the supply chain, right? It's our data, and we are feeding into this Chat GPT. So the world that's leveraging our data to to essentially prosper, right? Sure, they give back some value, but most value is captured by the shareholders of this nonprofit organization, right? So um, I think that's the first point, like why and how can we prevent that? How can we have a say and have a degree of agency in what in and how our data gets used? So that's number one. Number two is well, there's more on the Web3 side of things, right? So I think Web3 can help quite a lot. We're not there yet quite. I mean, I feel like, you know, there's a lot of promise in Web3 that, hey, we can have sovereignty, have a control, a lot of experimentation, different protocols tried this, but we're not quite there yet. I don't know what the solution is. I don't think it's an industry-wide acceptance of ethics or frameworks. I think it's going to be protocol driven. I don't believe that we can coordinate amongst strangers without a strong coordination layer, right? So second, ethics wise, I think this is more on the censorship and bad actor sort of like issue. Like, okay, Akash is censorship resistant, right? I mean, what does that mean? That means it's open for everybody, right? So anybody can host anything, and there's nothing anyone can do to stop you. So that means bad actors can abuse the network for really bad things, like things that you don't normally want to talk about, right? So how do we address that while maintaining censorship resistance, right? That's a big challenge, right? So Akash, we're trying a few things. There are different approaches, and we seems to be successful so far. But how do you prevent? Like RV has the same problem. I think deep in general, anything that hosts content has the same problem, right? Like, um, um, I don't know the solution. I mean, I think there's quite a lot of like for Akash, there is an optional moderation infrastructure that we're building where you as a provider, if you're hosting something that you don't want to host, you should be able to kick that content out, right? So making that easier. Free speech gives you the right to yell fire in a theater, but you also have to face the consequences, right? Um, I think I like to see more work in that area, right? I mean, how can we develop something that's open and doesn't take favorites, take sides, but at the same time protects the vulnerable, protects the against people that can abuse the system. So I don't think it's an industry-wide approach. It has to be technological driven because there's nothing. I mean, Web2 tried coordination, right? That doesn't work at all. It has to be a self-regulated system.
I think the self-regulation is, both the most important thing as well as the most challenging thing. We've seen it succeed to some extent in other industries, like movies and games industries. They make their own ratings, they self-regulate, and it's been so much better than having a centralized or a government agency come in and make those decisions. And it is very exciting to see as these Web3 technologies develop what their approaches to that are. Because there's no single entity. You can't just point your finger at Google and be like, take that down on a blockchain. So it's definitely a unique situation.
Yeah, I'd like to add on to what you were saying also before, especially on the deep end side, and it is where we harp on, encryption, right? We want to, in a perfect world, encrypt the model and also encrypt the user data. Just because one thing I observed in some deep end projects is, of course, it's transparent. So I can see, say, for example, like a deep end project where you have like an internet Wi-Fi that you let users use. You can see on the map where they're located, where they're pointing their direction at the altitude and all that stuff. And then you can also see how much they're making. Now, if I was, wanted to be a bad actor, I can go to this person's place, sabotage it, do something, maybe even create a monopoly.
$5 wrench attack,
Yeah, right. So I think that's where, encryption is, in ethics-wise, is the biggest thing. However, also, the censorship part is, that's also like, how do you create this free state where anyone has like the free power to like type what they want or research what they want, but then also keep it at a medium that you don't want to provide that information because it's maybe something sensitive, something detrimental to humanity and whatnot. So I think that's the biggest thing. And to be honest, I don't know where to find that balance between free data and then also free censorship.
Do you think it'll happen, do you envision a kind of more unanimous decision where we either have government coming in and making some decisions, or maybe there's like a standard that we all agree to? Or do you see this being every blockchain, every protocol, every organization maybe has their own rules and regulations that they enforce?
I think this is where we go to the conversation of now like bringing like a DAO type of network voting, where at least it does bring a fair level ground and people have decided it as a whole rather than a few couple people deciding.
Yeah, so this topic's mostly been around like trying to protect people from AI. I think the other side of this though is letting people have access to AI. So if you imagine in 10 years from now, if a small child, like 5-year-old, is going to school for the first time, having access to an artificial intelligence to help them learn is going to be a critical part of being competitive in the economy as they grow up and as they actually like become part of the functioning workforce. And this is actually a little bit terrifying because there's only so much supply chain for compute resources, and data is going to be progressively more safeguarded as this goes on. And so what we kind of hope here is that honeypots, like these giant corporations that seem to harvest all the data, kind of like what you were talking about at Google, like these giant honeypots of data are going to become obsolete because we simply won't allow them, because that means that effectively we're always at a disadvantage in the economy. That hopefully will happen, but also at the same time, it's an arms race, right? And so if you play chess, you know that you need to think a certain number of moves ahead, right? And so if you're trying to think about how many moves ahead you can think, and the other person's also trying to think a certain number of moves ahead, the person who thinks more moves ahead actually wins the game by default. And that's the competition. So it's like arm wrestling. And you just, the person with the bigger body generally wins on an arm wrestle. And if you're twice as big as somebody, you win. So if you can think 6 moves in advance and the other person can only think 3 moves in advance, the person who can think 6 moves in advance is going to win the game. So with AI, we think of this kind of the same way. The number of tokens in your model and the scale of compute resources and data that you can bring decides who wins. And that's going to become the economic future of our species for the most part. So if you can't access an AI model, and if you don't have access to this large compute network out there, you will lose. And that's what I'm worried about for my children. And I think probably everybody in the entire world should be worried about this. And this doesn't even matter, like it doesn't matter if you're a white collar worker or if you do some kind of labor job. Even in a labor job, you still need education, you still need access to resources, you still need to be able to figure out where to sell your stuff and to figure out the right price to sell it at. And so if you're in the economy, you need AI. And that means that every single person on this planet actually is going to need to have access to these resources. And how we share those resources is going to dictate how the future of our society evolves. And if we don't end up in a totalitarian system, it's going to be because we have some way of sharing compute as a community resource. And so I'm very dedicated to making that possible, which is why we tried to onboard all these people to give us their computers. And this is something I've been thinking about for about like 10 years at this point. And I think we're getting to a point where we're probably going to see one of these large honeypots breached by an AI. And that's going to lead to this massive wealth disparity. And it's already starting to happen in a sense. Like OpenAI now has made a deal with both Google and Apple and Microsoft. So that means that this one organization that's running the largest AI model in the world now has access to most of the data. And it's only a matter of time before they actually get access to the rest of it, because at this point they just will, right? If they're on your iPhone, they're going to have access to your Instagram. They're going to have access to pretty much everything. And the way that they manage that is going to be held behind closed doors. The guy who used to run the NSA is now running one of their major departments and is leading the Apple project, for context. So that's what we're headed towards. And if we don't do decentralized systems in this area, the ethics get very, very dicey very quickly. And I think the question is, can we stop talking about it and actually build something that leads us in this direction of actually solving the problem? It's very unlikely to me that we're going to solve it in time. So, yeah, not to be the doom and gloom guy, but we've got to figure this out really soon, guys.
You just gave me the chills with that.
I just want to add really quick. That future where students are using Chat GPT and these LLMs, it's now. I work with a lot of the New York City public schools, and they were recently telling me how disadvantaged this one school was in this one neighborhood, and they're like, yeah, it's so tough. Like they don't even have access to Chat GPT, and I was like, I didn't know fifth graders needed access to Chat GPT, but it is now, and so yeah, absolutely. Like, and who controls that is really going to be influencing a lot of those things. Those students are using these technologies. Our children are going to be using it. So yeah, it's really important.
For me, I want to focus on the transparency because the Web3 most part are transparent, right? But if when we build some application or index layer upon that, if that application or index are totally not transparent, then that's actually ruin the Web3, right? Because first thing, there are several benefits of transparency. One thing is that the transparency will build trust. If you think of Google, right? Today you search at Google, you trust the first page of results. But if you Google in the beginning, it's something like you ask some question whether I should sell Bitcoin. Like Google tells you, you should sell that. Why? Because that's my decision. That's Google's decision. Because after Google analyze all the websites, he tells you to sell. Then you will not trust it, right? Google just give you all the sources. Like then you will say, okay, that's something I can trust because you tell me why. I can decide to trust those things or not, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is that the transparency will lead to diversity, right? That's something Google is not doing good at because Google is not transparent at how it builds the system and how transparent its data is. If that's all open to everybody, then you will know, okay, here's a system, AI or search engine, that's how you build that. But I don't like some part of that. Then I will remove that part. I will embed another part that will be a customized search engine for my community or for myself, right? We will have like 1 million search engine or 1 million AIs. Each will fit into your specific needs. That will be more diversified and will be more useful to users if that's transparent. The whole system is transparent, and also the transparency will lead to the fairness distribution of the money, right? Because Google today, search engine or AI, they are not transparent at the business model, right? For example, if you were advertiser at Google, Google will not tell you, you need to trust Google. You cannot challenge Google at why you charge me so much money. Google just tell you, okay, there are like 10,000 users look at you, so I charge you for how many, like $10,000. But you don't know whether that's true or not. You need to trust Google. You can only accept that, right? So in Web3, if the AI or the application is transparent, then we can know, okay, what data is being used for what and for whom, what it does, right? If there are some money flowing into this system, then that money can go into whoever contribute to the flow. But if that's a black box, then you don't know where to distribute the money, right? I think the transparency is very important. It's not the transparent of the foundation Web3. It should be, all the upper layers should be transparent as well.
Yeah, transparency is very important. So we have about 5 minutes left. Does anyone have a question they'd like to ask to any of our panelists here? I'm gonna hand the mic to you. No? No questions? No curious? Okay, then I will actually give our panelists a few more minutes. I'll pass the mic down, and I'd love to hear where people can connect with you, your projects, what you're up to. What's the best way to have anyone follow you?
Well, I went doom and gloom on the last one, so I'm just going to add a slightly hopeful note. The hopeful idea here is that with Web3, we can also sell the compute resources that we have, like our phones and computers when we're not using them. And pretty much everybody's got fiber optic now, so you should be able to actually sell your own compute resources into this pool to get access to the compute resources you need. I only ask Chat GPT a couple questions a day, so a couple times a day, I need everybody in this room to give me their phone. And I can use all your devices, and I can ask a question. And then the rest of the time, you can all use mine. And there's a good chance that that might work, and maybe because it's a big community, we can actually iterate faster than something like Chat GPT. There's a small possibility that that's possible. Also, to Wei's point, it'd be great if we could see who's paying Sam Altman right now. So let's try to get that all on the blockchain as fast as possible. You can find me on Twitter at al_from_Koi or at koi.network, Koi with 2 I's, K-O-I-I.
All right, in summary, what ADOT is doing is that we are building a search engine for Web3 and a search engine that can fully run on blockchain. That's what we are doing. If you want to connect with me, you can first go to our website, a.syz. That's very easy to remember. And then there are some buttons of our Twitter and also our Telegram.
To find me, Greg Osuri, GREGOSURI on Twitter or Telegram. And Akash.network is the website for Akash. You'll find all the links for socials there.
You can find our socials at twitter.com/mynetwork_XYZ. And just want to announce we just launched our alpha mainnet. So now we're fully live. And our first partners are with the LRT projects and DeFi space. So that's EtherFi. And also now we've made a bridge for Scroll with Stakestone and Pencils. So I actually just received this news this morning. So I'm excited too, and going to be busy once I get back.
Awesome. Congrats on your launch, and make sure you follow all of our panelists to keep learning more about everything they talked about today. Thanks for joining me.